What if the food on your plate tonight was the last affordable meal you'd eat for months? That sounds dramatic, but the numbers coming out of every major global institution right now are nothing short of alarming. If you've been watching grocery prices climb and wondering when it stops, the honest answer is, it may not stop anytime soon. Stay with us, because what you're about to read could change how you protect your family's finances forever. And if this kind of critical financial education matters to you, please subscribe right now, because this is exactly the content we bring you every single week. Right now, the world is staring down a food crisis of historic proportions. According to the World Food Programme's 2026 Global Outlook, an estimated 318 million people are currently facing acute hunger worldwide. That number is more than double what it was before the COVID-19 pandemic hit in 2019. Let that sink in. Double in less than 7 years. In 2025, 2 simultaneous famines were confirmed in Gaza and parts of Sudan, marking the first time this century that 2 countries fell into famine at the exact same time. The WFP has stated that 41 million of those food-insecure people are living in emergency levels of hunger, a classification that sits one step below outright famine. The Global Report on Food Crises confirmed that over 295 million people across 53 countries experienced acute hunger in 2024 alone, a rise of nearly 14 million people from the year before. That is the 6th consecutive year in which acute food insecurity has increased globally, 6 years in a row. This isn't a temporary blip. This is a structural shift in how the world feeds itself. Conflict remains the dominant driver, with the WFP confirming that more than 2/3 of all acute food insecurity worldwide can be traced directly to conflict-driven crises. But conflict is only one part of the story. Climate shocks, droughts, floods, and violent storms are compounding the damage at an accelerating pace. Syria's crop production has fallen by 60% due to years of war and climate stress. According to the United Nations, 2.3 billion people experienced moderate or severe food insecurity globally, and over 2.6 billion people could not afford a healthy diet. That is, 2.6 billion people, 1/3 of the entire planet, unable to access the nutrition they need. Meanwhile, food price inflation remains dangerously elevated across most of the world. The World Bank's data from late 2025 shows that food price inflation exceeded 5% in 45% of low-income countries, in 43.5% of lower-middle-income countries, and in 41.9% of upper-middle-income countries. Even in wealthier nations, 9.1% of high-income countries were experiencing food inflation above 5%. In real terms, food price inflation exceeded overall inflation in 54% of the 166 countries where data was available. That means food is getting more expensive faster than everything else. Faster than rent, faster than energy, faster than wages. Fertilizer, energy, and transport costs remain elevated globally, squeezing farmers from every direction. Agricultural producers are facing margin compression, with costs for fertilizer, fuel, and labor rising faster than their revenue can keep pace. When farmers can't afford fertilizer, they plant less, and when they plant less, the world gets less food. Corn and wheat become too expensive to cultivate when nitrogen prices spike, so producers pivot to soybeans, which reduces the global supply of staple grains. That reduction in grain supply then spikes animal feed costs, forcing livestock producers to liquidate herds early, causing a temporary glut followed by a multi-year shortage of meat and dairy. This cascade effect means the food crisis you're seeing at the supermarket today is only the beginning of what's coming down the pipeline. The World Bank has warned that humanitarian and development funding to address these crises is simultaneously collapsing. squeezed by tight government budgets worldwide. The United States announced an 83% cut to its humanitarian program funding, according to Action Against Hunger's 2026 report. This was followed by significant cuts from Germany, France, Belgium, the United Kingdom, Sweden, and the Netherlands. A study published in The Lancet estimated that maintaining these cuts through 2030 could cause 14 million preventable deaths, including 4.5 million children under the age of 5. The WFP estimates it needs $13 billion to feed 110 million people in 2026, but current forecasts suggest it will receive only about half of that amount. At a time when needs are soaring, the financing to address them is collapsing. Now here's why this matters to your household finances. Even if you live far from any famine zone, food crises don't stay in one place. They ripple outward through supply chains, through export bans, through shipping disruptions, and ultimately through the price tags at your local grocery store. History has shown this pattern again and again. And history has also shown us exactly how ordinary people survive it. The first strategy history gives us is building a personal food reserve before prices spike further. During the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, families who had stored basic staples were far better positioned to weather years of economic devastation. In regions hit by the Dust Bowl, crops failed for nearly a decade, as prolonged drought beginning in 1931 and lasting 8 terrible years, combined with poor farming practices to destroy agricultural output across the Great Plains. Livestock died, crops withered, and families who had nothing stored had nothing to eat. Financial experts and emergency preparedness authorities today recommend maintaining at minimum a 3-month emergency food supply of shelf-stable goods. White rice, properly stored, can last up to 5 years and as long as 30 years when frozen, making it one of the most financially efficient long-term investments a household can make. Canned goods, dried beans, lentils, pasta, oats, and nuts and seeds provide nutrition, versatility, and long shelf life at a relatively low cost when purchased before prices rise further. Stocking up today at current prices is, in effect, a hedge against food inflation, buying your future meals at today's cost. This is not panic buying, this is precisely the kind of rationale, forward-thinking financial planning that has allowed families to survive every food and economic crisis in recorded history. The second strategy history teaches us is to reduce personal debt and build liquid emergency savings. When the Dust Bowl destroyed farm incomes and commodity prices collapsed, farm after farm was foreclosed upon by banks that showed no mercy. A farm in Shelby, Nebraska, that had been mortgaged at $4,100 was sold at foreclosure for just $49.50, a devastating loss that didn't have to happen had those families carried less debt. 1/4 of the entire state of Mississippi was auctioned off in a single day at a foreclosure auction in April 1932. Financial experts consistently advise building an emergency fund covering 3 to 6 months of household expenses before any crisis strikes. In Venezuela, where an economic and food collapse occurred in the late 2010s, prices doubled on average every 19 days, making debt a catastrophic liability and cash savings a lifeline. Morgan Stanley financial advisors recommend that during periods of uncertainty, households prioritize essential expenses, housing, food, transportation, and debt repayment, and cut discretionary spending immediately. Getting out of debt before a crisis is not just good financial hygiene, it is survival strategy number 1 from every economic collapse in history. The third strategy history provides is diversifying your income streams. During the Dust Bowl, 400,000 people left the Great Plains entirely, abandoning farms, homes, and livelihoods because their single source of income had been destroyed. Those who survived, and even thrived, were those who had developed multiple skills and could turn those skills into income in any economic environment. In today's context, this means developing what financial planners call multiple income streams, side businesses, freelance skills, passive income sources, or part-time employment that can sustain a household if a primary income is disrupted. Financial resilience is not just about saving money, it is about ensuring that money keeps coming in even when one source dries up. Individuals who developed community bartering skills, local trade networks, and resourceful side income during the Depression were significantly less vulnerable than those who depended on a single employer or a single harvest. During food and economic crises, the labor market also shifts skills tied to essential services. Food production, logistics, and healthcare hold their value far better than luxury sector jobs. Investing in developing practical, transferable skills is one of the highest return financial moves a person can make before a crisis arrives. The fourth strategy history reveals is shifting toward community and local food systems. In the 1930s, families and communities who shared resources, pooled knowledge, and helped their neighbors collectively survived at far higher rates than isolated households. The World Food Programme and the Global Network Against Food Crises both note that 70% of rural households in crisis-prone regions rely on local agriculture for their survival, and those who invest in local food systems build the strongest resilience. In just 4 years, the WFP and local communities turned 158,000 hectares of barren fields in Africa's Sahel region into productive farmland, demonstrating what community-level investment in food systems can achieve. For household finances, this translates to growing even a small amount of your own food, a kitchen, garden, balcony containers, or a community plot, which reduces exposure to supply chain volatility and grocery price inflation. Buying from local farmers when possible shortens the supply chain, reduces the risk of disruption, and often provides better value than globally sourced products during periods of international trade stress. Developing relationships with local food producers is the modern equivalent of the community networks that helped Depression-era families survive when markets failed completely. The fifth strategy history shows us is rebalancing personal investments toward crisis-resistant assets. During times of food and economic instability, certain investment sectors hold their value dramatically better than others. Consumer staples companies, those producing food, household essentials, and basic goods historically outperform growth stocks during economic downturns, according to investment data from multiple recessions. Healthcare and utility stocks similarly tend to hold value during crises because demand for these services does not disappear when economies contract. Hard assets, including real estate, gold, and silver, have historically served as stores of value when paper currency loses purchasing power during inflationary crises. During the Dust Bowl and Depression, those who had converted some of their financial holdings into hard assets before the crash retained far more of their wealth than those who held only bank deposits or paper investments. Morgan Stanley advises that staying invested through market volatility, while rebalancing toward defensive sectors, is typically the wisest long-term strategy, avoiding panic selling while ensuring portfolio stability. A food crisis does not just affect grocery bills, it ripples through commodity markets, shipping costs, energy prices, and the broader economy, affecting every investor regardless of geography. Understanding these linkages and positioning your portfolio defensively before the crisis deepens is a strategy that has rewarded careful, investors in every comparable period in economic history. The terrifying truth about the next food crisis is not just that it's happening, it's that most households are not financially prepared for it. The WFP's own data confirms that food insecurity has risen for 6 consecutive years and shows no signs of reversing, without dramatic intervention that the global community is currently underfunding. The cascade from international food crises to local grocery inflation is already underway, and the financial pain for ordinary families will deepen before it eases. But history does not leave us without hope. The families who survived the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl, and every food and economic crisis before and since did so with 5 consistent strategies. They built food reserves, they eliminated debt, they diversified their income, they strengthened community ties, and they held crisis-resistant assets. None of these strategies require wealth. They require awareness and early action. The window to act before prices rise further, before supply chains tighten further, and before the crisis deepens further, is open right now. History is not predicting doom. History is handing you a proven roadmap. The question is, will you use it? We'd love to hear from you. What are you doing right now to protect your household finances from rising food costs? Are you building a food reserve, paying down debt, growing your own food? Drop your thoughts and strategies in the comments below. Your experience could genuinely help someone else in this community. And if this kind of real, research-backed financial education is what you're looking for, please subscribe right now and hit the notification bell, because this is just one of the critical financial stories we cover every single week. Your financial future is too important to leave to chance. Subscribe today.